Welcome back to another episode of SmoothBrainEDH, where we make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. This week, we decided to go back into the wilds of cEDH and see which of our players has the biggest smooth brain of them all. First up is Cameron on the partner pairing of Tymna the Weaver and Ikra Shidiki the Usurper. This Abzan deck is an Ad Naz deck, hoping to use Ikra's life gain to get more card advantage off of cards like Ad Nauseam. He starts the game with the Misty Rainforest, Boseiju Who Shelters All, a Snow-Covered Swamp, Mox Opal, Avacyn's Pilgrim, Blood Pet, and Peer into the Abyss. Next up is Chandler on Magda, Brazen Outlaw. This mono-red deck hopes to assemble a combo in which infinite treasures are created in order to tutor out a win condition with Magda's activated ability. He keeps Scalding Tarn, Mana Crypt, Paradise Mantle, Astronaut's Transmigrant, Smuggler's Copter, Fork, and Underworld Breach. Our third player today is Ethan on the partner pairing of Krark the Thumbless and Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. This is a deck hopes to make multiple copies of Krark in order to create multiple copies of spells and storm off. He goes to 6, keeping Scalding Tarn, Polluted Delta, Prismatic Vista, Ponder, Rite of Flame, Fierce Guardianship, and his Lone Mulligan is an Unsubstantiate. Last is Logan on Crick, Son of Yawgmoth. This mono black deck hopes to leverage Crick's ability to pay life for mana cost in order to accelerate out combos that drain opponents' life totals down to 0. He keeps Cavern of Souls, Soul Ring, Inquisition of Kozilek, Reanimate, Buried Alive, Toxic Deluge, and Doubt the Voidwalker. We're about to hop right into the game, but before that, go ahead and give us a like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new content. We post new gameplay videos every week, so you don't want to miss it. Links to the Decklists, our social media, our Patreon, our podcast channel, and our public Discord are in the description. Our channel is also partnered with Dragon Shield, so if you're looking to pick up any new sleeves or magic-related products, check out our affiliate link in the description. Now, onto the gameplay.
Looks like Chandler will win the die roll. He'll start off by playing his Scalding Tarn, then he'll cast Paradise Mantle and Mana Crypt, and then he'll crack for a Mountain, cast Magda, leaving one colorless floating, and then we'll equip Magda with a Paradise Mantle before passing the turn to Ethan. Ethan will play a Polluted Delta and will immediately crack it, finding a Volcanic Island to the battlefield. He'll then cast a Ponder, looking at the top 3 cards of his library, choosing a Shuffle, drawing a card, and then we'll pass the turn to Logan. Logan starts his turn off with a Cavern of Souls, naming Horror, and then he'll tap it for the colorless it can produce to cast Soul Ring. He'll then tap it for 2 to cast Scroll Rack, then he'll pass the turn to Cameron. Cameron will play and crack a Misty Rainforest, saying he's going to get a Bayou. He'll then shortcut to cast Avacyn's Pilgrim and Mox Opal and pass while he's searching. Chandler starts his turn off by losing his flip, taking 3 damage, and then he'll play a Prismatic Vista as land for turn. He'll then tap his Mana Crypt to cast a Smuggler's Copter, and then we'll cast an Astronaut's Transmigrant. And then he'll just pass the turn to Ethan, who starts off by playing and cracking a Scalding Tarn, choosing to shock and Esteem Vents. He'll then tap for 2 to cast Allfather Krark. After this, the turn is Logan's, and he'll start by activating Scroll Rack, exiling 4 cards from his hand. After this, he'll play a Swamp as land for turn, then we'll cast a Zuran Orb, and then we'll tap for 3 to cast Buried Alive. He finds Chainer, Dementia Master, Viscera Seer, and Blood Celebrant to the graveyard. Then he'll just pass the turn to Cameron, who will play Boseiju Who Shelters All, and then we'll cast a Blood Pet, then pass the turn to Chandler. And on instep, Chandler will tap Magda to make a treasure. Now on his turn, he'll win his flip, not taking 3 damage, then we'll tap for 2 with his Mana Crypt, and then he'll cast a Sensei's Divining Top, then we'll pay 1 with his floating mana to look at the top 3 cards of his library and rearrange them. And he's not a fan of what he sees, so he'll put them back in no particular order, and then crack his Prismatic Vista, finding a mountain to the battlefield and giving his deck a good old shuffle. Continuing on, Chandler will crew his Looter Scooter with Magda, getting a treasure when he does so, and then he'll move to combat and will swing the Smuggler's Copter at Logan. He'll draw and discard a Spine of Ishtar upon attacking, and then Logan has no block, so he'll take 3 damage. Now on second main, Chandler will play a Mountain as land for turn, and then we'll just pass the turn to Ethan, who free casts a Lotus Petal, and then we'll play his own Prismatic Vista as land for turn. He'll then immediately crack it for a Mountain, and then we'll cast a Rite of Flame, Krark trigger. Ethan will be representing his copies with Pokemon cards, and if he wins the flip, he'll flip it over. He unfortunately fails his first one, so it's bounced back to his hand. But he'll just try to cast it again. Unfortunately though, he will fail again. And not wanting to try again, Ethan will pass the turn to Logan, who will start his turn off with a Snow Swamp. And then he'll cast his own Sensei's Divining Top. He'll then cast his commander, Krark, by paying 4 mana and 6 life. Chandler will respond by paying 1 to his Sensei's Divining Top to look at the top 3 cards of his library. He'll then activate Top's other ability to draw a card and then put Top on top. Krark will then resolve, and Logan will then pay 2 life to cast Reanimate, targeting Chainer. Krark trigger, and then Chandler, knowing that Logan with a Chainer could potentially end the game here, decides to cast Fork to copy the Reanimate. Logan decides that he wants to respond by swapping tops. Unfortunately for him though, he doesn't find anything, and Chandler will get a copy of Reanimate, and he'll have it target Logan's Chainer, putting it to the battlefield under his control and losing 5 life. Logan's not done though, he'll pay 6 life to cast a Necropotence. Krark will trigger again, and then once it resolves, Logan will pay an additional 6 life to exile 6 cards. And since Logan only has 1 card left in hand, he'll move to his end step, refill his hand, and then the turn is passed to Cameron, who will start off with his own Snow Swamp. He'll then tap for 2, paying 2 to Boseiju to cast an Earthcraft. And then he'll just pass the turn to Chandler, who loses his Mana Crypt trigger. He'll then cast his Sensei's Divining Top again, and then activate it to rearrange the top 3 again. After this, he'll swap his tops, and then we'll tap for 2 to cast a Pardic Miner. He'll then use it to crew his Smuggler's Copter, getting a treasure, and then he'll move to combat. He'll swing 3 in the air at Cameron, attack trigger, and he'll draw and discard his top. He'll then attempt to pass turn, but Ethan will cast Mystical Tutor on his end step, Krark trigger. He'll win his flip, getting 2 copies of it. Cameron has a response though. He'll tap his Swamp, his Aphistance Pilgrim, and then his Blood Pet to untap his Swamp, and then he'll tap his Swamp again to cast Opposition Agent. There are no responses at the table, so it'll hit the battlefield, and then Ethan's Mystical Tutors will resolve. And after taking a good look at Ethan's deck, Cameron decides to exile Brain Freeze and Flusterstorm. And after this, the turn is officially passed to Ethan. And he'll play a Cascade Bluffs, then tap for 4 to cast Sakashima, copying Krark. Ethan will then attempt to pass the turn, but Logan will stop him on end step, pay 2 life, and cast Cling to Dust on Mystical Tutor, drawing him a card, and getting Krark another counter. Now on his turn, Logan will play a Vault of Whispers as land for turn, and then he'll activate Scroll Rack again, exiling another 4 cards. After this, he'll cast Carrion Feeder, getting another counter on Krark. Then we'll pay 4 mana and 2 life to cast Grey Merchant of Asphodel. Logan is pretty low, and the table doesn't want him to gain 27 life and drain them each for 9. Cameron and Chandler can't do anything about the spell, and neither can Ethan, but after it resolves, Ethan will crack his Lotus Petal and stifle the trigger. There are 2 Krark triggers though, so there's a chance Ethan won't get this. He loses the first one, and the second one. So the Grey Merchant's ability will resolve, draining everyone for 9 and bringing Logan all the way back up to 40. He then immediately goes down to 30, paying 10 life to Necropotence. He'll then move to end step to put those 10 to his hand. After this, he has to move to cleanup, and he'll discard Infernal Darkness, Sensei's Divining Top, Ancient Tomb, Mana Vault, Exotic Orchard, Chrome Mox, and Sign in Blood. And then after this, the turn is passed to Cameron. And he'll start by making 2 black with the help of Earthcraft using his Snow-Covered Swamp. He'll then use one of those floating black to cast a Dark Ritual, getting him up to 4 black. He'll then cast Ikra Shidiki by using that 4 black and tapping for the green. The turn is then passed to Chandler, who will stop on end step to tap Magda again to get another treasure. Now in his turn, he'll lose his Mana Crypt flip again, and then he'll tap his Pardic Miner to crew Looter Scooter again, and then he'll move to combat. Also, he gets another treasure when he taps the Dwarf. He'll swing for 3 in the air at Cameron, and when he attacks, he draws a card and discards a Jeweled Lotus. And then Cameron will take 3 damage. Now on second main, Chandler will tap for 2 and cast Goblin Engineer, declining the ETB trigger when it enters. And after this, Chandler will pass the turn to Ethan. And Ethan will just pass the turn to Logan after untapping. And Logan starts his turn off with a Mox Diamond, discarding an Herb Orb. And then he'll play a Homeward Path as land for turn. Using it, he'll activate its second ability to try to gain control of his Chainer again. If this happens, he pretty much wins the game on the spot, because using Krark's ability, a Sack Outlet, and Chainer, he can continuously loop his Grey Merchant to kill his opponents. Luckily, the table's saving grace arrives. Ethan casts Stifle again, 2 Krark triggers. He wins the first one, and the copy will target Homeward Path's ability. He then loses the second one, returning the Stifle back to his hand. So Logan's combo is stopped at least for a turn. But he's not going to end his turn yet. He pays 2 life and taps his Soul Ring to cast a Cabal Ritual with 1 colorless floating. He'll hold priority and sacrifice Grey Merchant to Carrion Feeder, and then Carrion Feeder to Carrion Feeder, so now he has 7 cards in graveyard, and also Krark gets a counter. The table lets it resolve, so now he has 5 black mana and 1 colorless in his pool. Then, using that mana and paying 4 life, he'll cast Villas, Broker of Blood. Krark will get another counter, and then the table asks around if anybody has any responses. Villas is a huge enabler in Logan's deck, so when priority hits Chandler, he casts Tybalt's Trickery on it. Logan has to mill 3 cards, a Vampiric Tutor, an Emergence Zone, and a Gemstone Mine. And the card he flips into and gets to cast is Necromancy. He will cast it, and then there is a large discussion at the table. Necromancy is a very old card, and it reads very weird. Ethan, as we all know, has a Stifle in hand and wants to know if it entering the battlefield and reanimating is an ETB trigger that he can counter. And after getting some good guidance from our judge Jason, the table learns that when Necromancy enters the battlefield, it has a triggered ability that turns it into an aura that attaches to the creature in the graveyard. And so when the Necromancy resolves, the trigger will go on the stack and Ethan will attempt to stifle it. 2 Krark triggers. He loses the first, but will win the second, and this stifles the ability, making it just a regular enchantment on the battlefield that doesn't do anything. And so after all that, Logan will then cast a Blood Pet, which gets Krark another counter. And then he'll pay 6 life to his Necropotents. He'll then pass the turn, those cards will go to his hand, and then the turn is Cameron's, who immediately moves to combat and swings Ikra Shidiki at Ethan, who just takes the damage. Ikra's damage trigger will resolve and Cameron gains 7 life. He'll then tap his Boseiju for a mana, losing 2 life, then he'll tap his Swamp for black mana, Earthcraft it twice for 2 more black mana, and then sacrifice his Blood Pet for yet another black mana, and then he'll cast an uncounterable Ad Nauseam. It'll resolve, and the first flip is Ancient Tomb, then a Demonic Tutor, then Assassin's Trophy, Dothy Voidwalker, Witherbloom Apprentice, 3 lands in a row, then a Noxious Revival, another land, then Enlightened Tutor, Cabal Therapy, Carpet of Flowers, an Overeager Apprentice, 2 more lands and a Summoner's Pact, another land and a Veil of Summer, Mox Diamond, Hope of Girapur, Silence, Yawgmoth's Will, and then he takes a good look at the pile he's flipped so far. All he needs is a Chain of Smog and he can win the game by playing a land and dropping his Mox Diamond. So he keeps going and flips Sylvan Library. Then a Wild Growth, looks at his pile again, says he didn't come this far to quit now, and then flips a Ranger Captain of Eos, which is exactly enough to kill him. Logan is now very worried because without that opposition agent, Chandler might actually win the game now. But he remembers Ethan's Stifle, which Chandler has to play around. And now the turn is Chandler's. And he'll start by attempting to Lightning Bolt Sakashima. Ethan understandably Fierce Guardianships this, 2 Krark triggers. He loses the first one, and then wins the second one, countering the Lightning Bolt. Moving on, Chandler will crew his Smuggler's Copter with his Miner getting a treasure when it becomes tapped, and then he'll move to combat, swinging Magda at Ethan and Smuggler's Copter at Logan. When Magda attacks, she becomes tapped, so he'll make another treasure token. And then Chandler will decline the loot trigger. Post-combat, Chandler will activate his Goblin Engineer to sacrifice a treasure, returning Sensei's Divining Top to the battlefield. Then he'll activate the top to rearrange the top 3 cards of his library. After rearranging, he'll swap his tops to draw a card, and then he'll cast Dockside Extortionist. With Logan having 7 artifacts and or enchantments, this Dockside makes Ethan's Stifle pretty much useless now. Because if Ethan stifles this, Chandler can just respond by sacrificing 5 treasures to go get his combo. Speaking of Chandler's combo, let me explain how it works for you. If he sacrifices 5 treasures, he can go get Clock of Omens. He'll then activate Ashnod's Transmogrant to make Magda an artifact. Assuming Ethan already used his Stifle, Chandler will have 1 treasure, Paradise Mantle, and Clock of Omens left untapped. He can tap 2 of them to untap Magda, and then tap Magda and the last one to untap Magda, making a treasure. He can then repeatedly tap Magda and the treasure she makes to make infinite tapped treasures. He can then sacrifice 5 of those tapped treasures to go get Grinding Station, and then he can continue his infinite tap treasure loop, and in between each of them, he can tap Grinding Station to mill someone. And then when Magda makes another treasure, it untaps, so on and so forth until he mills everyone out. Now let's assume Ethan didn't counter the Dockside ability. He and Chandler run through where he could potentially stifle, but unfortunately, because of those extra treasures, if Ethan tried to stop the first search, Chandler still has the second one. If he tried to counter the Transmogrant's ability, Chandler could respond by searching up another artifact that did the same thing. And if he tried to counter an untap trigger, Chandler had more than enough artifacts at that point to just respond by untapping again. So Ethan decides it's best to just go ahead and try to stifle the Dockside Extortionist ability, hoping that Logan has something to help them out here. And there's 2 Krark triggers. Chandler responds by activating Magda and sacrifices 5 treasures. Logan then responds to this by activating Scroll Rack, exiling his entire hand, hoping to find a Slaughter Pact. Unfortunately, those top 7 cards do not help him at all, and Chandler will find the Clock of Omens to the battlefield. He'll then start his loop by making Magda an artifact, and then he'll tap Paradise Mantle and Clock of Omens to untap Magda. He'll then tap Magda and his last treasure to untap her. With the loop presented and no responses at the table, Chandler will make infinite tap treasures, then go fetch his Grindstone to finish everyone off. Well everyone, there you have it. That was an awesome game. Logan's deck had us on our toes pretty much the entire game. And if Cameron would have found one more card, he would have had it as well. Ethan, of course, being the blue deck, had to ensure no one went off, and then Chandler snuck in the win because Cameron went a little too far with that Adnos. Let us know what you thought in the comments down below, and while you're down there, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and check out all our links in the description. There's a lot in there. And I know you guys might be a little sick of seeing the same decks every cEDH video, but don't worry, we're going to try to spice it up for our next one. And by the way, while I've got you here, we're going to be trying to do a video with custom homebrew commanders. So if you have any good ideas or commanders that you've made, there's going to be a link down in the description where you can submit it, and we might end up playing it. As always, everybody, thank you so much for watching. It has been my pleasure narrating this game for you. Have a smooth day.